South Africa's unemployment rate is now the highest it's been at 35.3%. Xolani is here with me now to talk about these figures and how are these figures translating. What do they tell us about where we are?
They tell us that unemployment in this country is no longer a crisis, it's an emergency. When you see that, almost 70% of youth, are unemployed, sitting at home. If you look at some of the, information that is coming up, you can see there that the employed in Q3 were sitting at 14.3 million. Now they're sitting at 14.5 million. And that's because 262,000 more people were employed, but in the fourth quarter, 278,000 people joined the ranks of the unemployed. And when you look at those who are not economically active or in training or education, that number shoots up to 14 million in the third quarter, slightly down in the fourth quarter at 13.6 million. So you can see that more and more people, particularly particularly in 2021, and it's not just because of the July unrest. It's not just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a number of issues because these problems have been there. Structural problems have been there since before COVID. And if you look, 39.9 million people of working age, that's who we have. Our labor force is sitting at 22.5 million, but still 17.4 million are not economically active. So it's something that is, quite a huge worry. This is an emergency. When you look at that 35.3%, that tells you that this is a crisis. When you look at our, peers in emerging economies, that is a crisis, and I don't think people are hearing enough from the government as to what exactly should be done with this particular problem. This is an increase of 0.4 percentage points from that 34.9% in the third quarter, but it is a worrying trend. And when you look at something that is absolutely worrying, when you look at it provincially, the expanded definition that includes people who have stopped looking for work, 1, 2, 3, 4 provinces, half the people there are not working. The Northern Cape, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and the Eastern Cape still leading there at 53.2%. These are new figures. This is new, and it's something that is a worry as to what are the policies. You mentioned the manufacturing sector. They shed 85,000 jobs. You see them at the bottom there. Manufacturing sector followed by construction and transport. Those are in thousands. And when you look at private households, we're talking about various people who do small jobs, 129,000 added in trade, 118,000. This is a picture that is mixed. You are adding more workers, but you are actually shedding more. And when you look at the race, or who are the most vulnerable, it's the youth, it's black women, and it's African. And when you look at those numbers, it tells you a big picture. The unemployment rate among the black African at 39.1% is higher than the national average. So
which is what, 35.3%?
35.3%. So it is a huge issue that needs to be tackled immediately because it's something that is going to be with us for some time. And I mentioned again, Tembegile, that we've had this problem. I think 10 years ago we were sitting at 25%. There was no COVID then. Today it's 10 percentage points higher, and we are looking at a serious crisis, not only a crisis, an emergency that is going to give rise to other issues where you see unrest. We might see more unrest, according to experts around the world. South Africa is one of those countries that is on the brink of seeing more and more unrest, and this is a huge worry. It's
been a long-standing warning, hasn't it, Xolani, that South Africa, if it doesn't do something to fix the unemployment situation, that is likely to be the cause of the greatest social unrest. People don't know when, but there have been warnings that it is a ticking time bomb. And I wonder, as these numbers continue to get worse with each report from Stats SA, what the reaction is then to this latest data.
Well, the reaction has been quite, people are shocked. We were expecting that there would be a small dent in the numbers, because December is where there is a period where there are piece jobs, small jobs here and there. So you would expect that maybe there is a better outlook. This is not it. Youth unemployment sitting at 66.5%, with 3.4 million youths aged between 14 and 25 not employed or in education or training. And with the experts that we are talking to, such as the portfolio manager at Rand Swiss and market analyst Viv Govender, he says unless something is done immediately, we should expect this number to tick up every quarter. And that is a scary, scary thought when it comes to the outlook. Take a listen to what he said his view is on what the problem is. One of the problems is when it comes to the joblessness in the country.
Development is quite low in terms of income, in terms of the amount of money young people have and so on. If we want to progress, if we want to do what China has done, what India is currently doing, where we go from being very, from a low base to a higher base, you need to not just basically keep up with the rate at which we are increasing the number of people in the workforce. We have to increase at a higher rate than that. We have to basically have greater demand in the economy to drive up basically wages, to drive up demand for labor, to push our people to a higher level. And unfortunately, at the moment, because the unemployment rate is so high, what's really happening is not only are we behind, where we want to be, we are falling behind, further behind each time these numbers come out.
And what do economists believe, Xolani, as far as the way forward? What should we be doing?
You can't put a dent on unemployment without doing something about the economic growth. Our economic growth is stagnant. It's really nothing that we can do or we are doing about it. We saw last week there was an investment conference. We are closer to that target of 1.2 trillion rands. But others are saying there is a boycott when it comes to this. But Tumisang Ndlovu caught up with Professor Adrian Saville at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, and this is how the conversation went as far as what his response is to the numbers.
Youth unemployment in South Africa remaining one of the toughest challenges, increasing also to an all-time high of around 66.5%, along with that rise that we saw in the quarterly labour force survey of South Africa's unemployment rate, now sitting at 35.3%. The likes of graduates, that number also increasing, with them being unable to find work in the South African economic landscape. I'm joined now by analyst Adrian Saville to talk more about these numbers. Adrian, quite difficult times. It was expected that there would be an increase in the unemployment rate, but what type of picture does it paint of the South African labour landscape?
The problems take on the proportion of crisis. That when you talk about a youth unemployment number that begins with 6, and this is deeply entrenched. It's broad-based. If you look at the geographic distribution, it's a greater challenge in some provinces versus others, but across all provinces, the number is extremely elevated. It's stubbornly just not moving, and the economy is missing in action. So you've got this double bind of an economy that isn't playing its part. It's not providing solution. And at the same time, the longer people are unemployed, the more likely they are to remain unemployed. And that's what we would call structural unemployment, that you're essentially permanently unemployed.
It's quite a terrifying picture, really moving into a pace of slow economic growth that's continuing. But another issue that was raised by Stats SA is that there is a bulk of South African youth that is not even prepared for a labour market in terms of skills. How do we address that?
And that's what I was referring to a little earlier about, if you have been unemployed, you are more likely to stay unemployed as opposed to, suddenly being offered a job and having the skills. And those skills are not just about education. Those skills are, job literacy. being able to arrive at the workplace and present yourself to the workforce. So it really is a multifaceted problem, and it points to the critically needed structural reforms in the South African economy. Those we've been speaking about for a long time. I think there's some very modest silver lining if you point to the investment conference of last week, the announcements around energy and also telecommunications. Those are much needed structural reforms, but these are very, very small steps, and they're coming extremely late in the game.
Structural reform needed in the South African economy, at least to ensure that there's some movement with regards to working towards taking down the number of unemployment, but the labour landscape, along with economic growth, continuing to be a challenge, especially in a country where the government is looking to eradicate what is known as the triple challenges: inequality, as well as poverty and unemployment in South Africa, which is increasing unabated.
Harrowing analysis there, Thembekile, something that tells you that if you are unemployed today, you are likely to remain unemployed for the rest of your life. But those are the experts. Let's see how the public has responded to these numbers. If you look at Daniel Sick, an economist that is well known, he says South Africa reports another sad unemployment record today at 35.3% official, 46.2% expanded. Job creation has been moving towards crisis proportion for years before COVID. It's time to admit the failure of existing economic policies. And Thapelo Mputi says unemployment rate increased. Just to remind you, President Ramaphosa, the levels of unemployment are directly proportional to the levels of crime. That's Thapelo Mputi there, really talking about something that is quite important. When people don't have an outlet, that's where they actually go. They resort to crime when they don't have any other means. There's more tweets from the public. Martinus Barnard says, just imagine having an innovative youth that can change the world sitting at home. 7 out of 10 youth does not have a job. This unemployment needs to be a state of emergency. That is Martinus. And Tandi Lloyd Masheko says we have rising unemployment and rising inflation, rising poverty levels and rising inequalities, rising political unrest and rising crime. We have a president and the ANC that blue ticks all these issues. A recipe for disaster and war. Something that is, something
that's quite troubling when you read it all together.
Exactly. Ujagala says unemployment is one of the new democratic of South Africa's main policies. Creating jobs is not rocket science. There's no jobs in South Africa because they don't want there to be jobs. That is diabolical when you think of it. And they're using a headline. When you look at it, I can't read clearly there who it's from, but he's talking about that promise that President Cyril Ramaphosa made of 800,000 jobs. And he says that Ramaphosa has failed to deliver on his promises of creating 800,000 jobs in South Africa. He has failed as a leader. He must resign with immediate effect. That is, a call to people to say, this is what we want from you as the president. Female Diane says that, but our graduate news feeds are flooded with graduates. And it's sad those sectors with great influx of undocumented foreign nationals are needed by poor South Africans. This is going to be a debate for some time, whether it's the right one or the wrong one, whether we're in the wrong side of the debate or not.
But it is likely, isn't it, Xolani, to fuel some of that sentiment, because we've just seen in recent weeks people saying, well, we want undocumented migrants or migrants altogether to get out of jobs in retail, stop selling food on the side of the street, because a South African should be there precisely because the unemployment stats are so high. Whether that's completely accurate or not is a whole other debate.
But you are right. It is going to fuel that particular debate. The immigration issue is still going to come in. Those who are actually proponents of it are going to use this data to actually push their agenda ahead. But it's something that is quite a serious worry. As you see, Thembekile, it is the big story of the day.
And we'll leave it there for now, Xolani and the rest of the business team will continue to keep you across the various developments around the issues to do with the latest unemployment stats. But we're not quite finished yet, Xolani, because we haven't looked at the markets.
Yes, we haven't looked at the markets. Let's take a look at how the markets are doing at this hour, Tembegile.